Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Many of us, as we approach midlife and beyond, discover that we have emotional pain that is sometimes so deeply repressed that we're not even aware that it's there. Finding ourselves living a life of regret for the things that we have done, especially also the things that we haven't done, is one of those burdens that we wonder whether or not we'll ever be able to put one foot in front of the other and find the life of our dreams. Emotional pain is invisible. It's a kind of wound that is, when left unhealed and unchecked, can be a constant source of pain and stress, continuing to inflict needless emotional suffering year after year. Our guest joining us here on the program today is an educational counselor, speaker, seminar leader, and author. She also holds a doctorate degree in the field of psychology, who in her late 20s was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, which was told she could eventually lose her eyesight. Nevertheless, her visionary message has reached thousands striving for personal and professional growth over the decades. Her newest book is Through the Tunnel: Unlock the Pain of Your Past and Find the Courage to Grow Up and Not Just Grow Old. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Dr. Bonnie Lyon. Dr. Lyon, thank you for being on the program today.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I appreciate being here.
Now, it's really intriguing in your story that you shared that you didn't really grow up having a mother to have an impact with your life. Tell us about that.
Well, my mother passed away the day I was born, and I had a stepmother before stepmothers were in vogue, Daniel. So we never spoke of it. It was never acknowledged, but she never owned me as her daughter. I have an older sister that was 2.5 at the time. And so never, ever in my whole life have been called a daughter. And I was a granddaughter. I don't have any daughters. I have 3 boys. And the impact is the nurturing that women give to women, because women need each other for support, for comfort, for encouragement. They give it different than men do. I had an awesome father, but I can't hardly imagine, Daniel, what it would be to have traveled this life with a real live mother. Despite whether she's perfect or not, we always put halos around people who have passed on. So I don't give her the halo effect. I mean, even if she had been an alcoholic, a drug addict, at least I would have known she was mine. And I think that's the missing part of women who lose their mother in childbirth. It's a wound that never heals.
Now, how did you find that particular emotional, trauma, if you will, spilling over into other areas of your life?
As I was raising my boys, and I would see and hear about mother and daughter events at the school, and I encouraged mother and son events, that it would always touch a place in my heart at church when they had mother and daughter outings, as I tried to get close to my mother-in-law, and she had a daughter, and she didn't have any need for me to be close, that you can't penetrate a birth connection with another mother and daughter. I had an aunt, Danielle, who I was very, very close to, and the closer we got, the more her daughter got jealous of us. So things like that I see, and this isn't particular to my own story. It is women who look for a place to belong, to belong in their genealogy, in their history. I've done a lot of work with women who may not have lost their mother in childbirth, but who have lost their mother on the way to growing up, like in elementary school or in high school. It always leaves a tale of what you've missed out on, of not quite being whole, because you didn't have that nurture, that connection that was undeniable.
As you say this, I'm thinking as I was reading through your book about the many stories that you share in there from different people. Alice comes to mind immediately because of what you're sharing here and about how hard her parents were on her. And you have to wonder sometimes where we came up with the idea that life should be the particular way that it is, or should be, versus the way that it is, and how often we tend to create our own suffering just because of that very thought. Well, how come life, for instance, in your case, your mom passed when you were young. You never could really seem to get that connection with a stepmother or maybe even a surrogate mom or parents, whatever the case is.
Right.
Where we come up with that thinking that life is supposed to be this particular way? Is it from the fairy tales that promise us this happily ever after situation? What is it that we've bought into that makes us believe these things?
The cultural norm, Hallmark, Mother's Day, Christmases, the way we're enculturated. The unrealistic expectations. Now, I want you to get real clear with you, Daniel, that even though my mother passed away as I was not even a day old, my life has been wonderful. I have connected to many, many women. I haven't had a surrogate mother, but because of this event in my life, it draws me to create really deep connections with women, not only that I counsel, but women in my personal life as well. So I see it as a really leg up to appreciate relationships specifically with women who are a right match to you. But I think we all believe so many half-truths, if you will, and we form our expectations on those faulty core beliefs of what life should be. And they can cause a lot of pain if you stay stuck in it.
Well, especially when you consider the fact that parents do that a lot with their own children. It's not too unusual to hear about a parent really trying to live through their children to undo the mistakes they felt they had made growing up, and that gets to be pretty painful, actually.
It gets really tricky, doesn't it? It gets heavy. It gets sad. You're right. It doesn't work. The only person who can grow you up, or any of us, me up, is yourself, is dealing with reality, not living in denial, not living in fantasy, not living in I wish it could have, would have, should have been, but to embrace and find the treasure in today, find the joy and the gift in now, and then take off, and it always can make you a deeper person.
Now, as I was describing in the beginning of the show, you also had a physical situation that had cropped up for you. Yeah. Now let's talk about that, because I've actually known people. In fact, there's one particular person that I knew who got into a car crash, and this happened probably just maybe within 2 years after she graduated from high school. And I had asked about her. I just was wondering through a friend of mine, how she was doing. And he says, well, she won't talk to anybody. She's just basically shelled up in her house in a wheelchair, because apparently that's what this car crash did. And I thought to myself, how often people will actually become bitter because something happened they feel shouldn't have happened. And they just close down and, let's just say, no to life kind of a situation. But that didn't happen with you. Tell us about that.
No, it didn't. I refused to allow my life circumstances to dictate my potential or my behavior and ability to live a full, rich life. I was diagnosed at 23, and at that time I was a medical assistant, and there was like a snowstorm, Daniel, and I had just done glucose tolerance tests. I had a tray full of test tubes that I had collected all morning from patients. I walked across the street to the hospital, to the lab, and I walked right in front of an 18-wheeler. Okay, so we're having a snowstorm. He skidded to a stop, jackknifed, got down from his truck, and he swore at me thinking I wanted to commit suicide. Here I was, 23, I had my nurse's uniform, little hat on, walking across the street in the snow. He could obviously see what I was carrying. And that very day, I decided that I have to see if something's wrong with my vision, because I looked, I didn't see. I am usually a very clear thinker. I live in reality. And subsequently, an ophthalmologist that was working in our complex where I was an assistant to an internist, he diagnosed me with retinitis pigmentosa, and he said, Bonnie, you've already lost all your peripheral vision. That's how I could walk in front of that 18-wheeler. And I comforted him. I said, as long as I don't lose my mind, life is going to be wonderful. And I made a decision right then and there. I was more than my eyesight. I could lose my eyesight, but I would never, ever, ever let anything rob me of my vision. And my life is challenging, but I think my blindness gives me advantages, and it's a gift. It draws me deeper. My clients say, who I talk to, tell me that repeatedly. And it's nothing I do, Daniel, it's just who I am when I show up. It's a choice.
Because you have a very unique way to see the world now, don't you?
I do. And it's great. I knew how to be a sighted person, not perfectly, of course, but to me it's a challenge. How can I live life not flawlessly, but I don't allow my limitation like to cause me not to go to a social event or go to the movies. People say, you go to the movies? I said, well, of course I go to the movies. Why wouldn't I? Well, you can't see the screen. And I say, hello, I am not just blind in the movie theater. I am blind on the outside of the movie theater, too. So I don't see out there either. So why wouldn't I go to a movie? And people limit because of fear and being different themselves and put them in their own prison of pain instead of saying, what can I do with this? How can I make this like an exploratory? I think my whole life is like a great adventure to see how I can stand on top of this mountain of accomplishment and find joy in it and be happy and allow yourself to be different.
So, see, there's the key is it's what you decide to do with what you have. And it's really amazing when you look at a situation that seems to be deeply adverse and you realize, well, it can change you in one of two ways. Either way, it's always a choice. It can either improve your life or it can make your life worse, but it's still always a choice.
There's always options.
Mm-hmm. Tell us how you dealt with the choice or how you decided to choose the direction that you chose.
I always liked to be around energy. I thought I would love to have grown up to be a nurse in the ER because I love the energy. I like to think on my feet. I love to help people. I like to be right in the center, sick of it all. And I decided that probably wouldn't be so good if I couldn't see what I was doing. So I thought I love people. People are my passion. I love to think outside the box and create. And I thought, okay, the field of psychology would be great because then I could teach people. I'm a teacher, like you said, educational counseling. I love to teach people how to not only fish for themselves, but to go out and own their own lake, to see them, to be able to open the vista of their mind to explore their potential and get out of their own box. So what really drew me to this field was my passion and deep love for all people.
Now,
makes their life better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems that you've taken it to a level of counseling, so you found a way to serve. And I think that's one of the greatest things a person can do with a gift, especially a gift of adversity, is, well, how do you find a way to help others to heal and to gain balance and to get back into the game of life? And you realize you can take your adversity to do that very thing, because once you share your story or your experience with somebody, then you realize they think, well, I'm not alone in this. And that really changes the game, doesn't it?
Sure, it is a game changer. Or people, Daniel, if you were to see me right now, you would say, you could call me a liar, because people have said that to me, to my face, because I'm looking right at them. My eyes track. My right eye doesn't track quite right, but it pretty much tracks. My eyes look normal. They're blue. And people say, you're looking right at me. But then they try to hand me something, and then because they test me. They don't believe I can't see them. So they have to test to make sure I really can't see them, and then they start listening. Because I'll do a workshop with them for like 3 hours, and only at the end will I tell people that I have no eyesight left. And that is the lesson, that we're not limited by, goes back to what you started the show with, unrealistic expectations of ourselves, or trying to only comply or live by the cultural norms. I say, who were you created to be? And what can you learn from this? And how can it make you extraordinary? I think disabilities, and this isn't patting myself on the back, it's just, it makes you extraordinary if you go out your front door every day and you face your situation. You do the best with what you got to work with, and there's always options.
Now, it's really fascinating that you use examples of the book, and I think a lot of people like the stories of others because they realize there's a way they can identify with them and say, well, I see myself in that a little bit there, and so that's how they dealt with it. And I always like to give a wonderful, I guess, call it a piece of advice for people out there, and I've shared this on the program many times. I say, get out there and read biographies and autobiographies, especially if it's of people that you consider to be those that you highly esteem. You think their life is just this, and you'll come to realize for them to become what they became, you'd be amazed at the level of obstacles these people have had to endure. I mean, you consider, for instance, Abraham Lincoln. Now, maybe you don't want to become president of the United States, but take a look at how he took on the nation. As a person with basically a third-grade education. The situation with his wife and the illnesses that she had while he was serving probably one of the roughest terms in presidential history. That's one example. Or you look at, for instance, Leonardo da Vinci, to realize here was a young boy who was actually molested as a young child. And to look at the beauty that he put out there into the world and the way he was a game changer, for instance, in the world of forensic medicine, and so forth. And when you begin to really read these things, it's like my own wife actually likes to say is, if you were to take all the problems in the world and you were to put individual piles out there, you would gladly go ahead and take back your pile.
Your own, sure. That's really true. That's really, really true. And I think with Abraham Lincoln and the examples you were using, that the adversity or the challenges people go through in their life, it doesn't make them, it reveals them. And who are we all becoming in our journey through life? Because we focus on our what we can acquire, our retirement funds and what we're going to do after retire, our kids, what they're becoming, all the things outside of ourselves. But I think the focus needs to go back to who are you becoming, Daniel? Who are you becoming, Bonnie, through your gift of life? And every gift is wrapped in different paper and different ribbon. And they're all precious. They're all needed. They're all very, very useful to make this world go around.
Now, I was going to say, is it okay to call you Bonnie or Dr. Lion? Which one do you prefer?
Call me Bonnie.
Okay, because the lion has roared. So anyway, one of the things you talk about, we've all heard this. We've certainly gotten this piece of advice from one area or the next about our past. A lot of times we tend to live in our past and we look at our future through our past.
Sure.
And that's not possible. I mean, it's already happened. You can't change it, but you can certainly change the way you remember or experience this. What is it about us that keeps us caught in that loop? Because that's certainly a self-sabotaging behavior, isn't it?
It certainly is self-sabotaging. And that loop becomes incessant, and it can be lifelong because we're so afraid to really get off that look and maybe choose different behaviors, or really look in the mirror, because we think it protects ourselves because we know the present or the past pain. We're familiar with it, but we don't know the future. And so many people, Daniel, would rather stay stuck and connected in their past pain than to risk the unknown. And that's one of my jobs, is to help break the legacy of pain, that loop, because it is incessant, it is chronic. However, it is absolutely, you can step out of that loop and back into truth. And what is the truth of your life today? You can't unscramble eggs, you can't go back to the past and undo it, but you certainly do not have to replicate it in the future. We all have a history. Nobody can rescue any of us from our histories, but it's a choice. Our history doesn't have to dictate tomorrow or even the next 5 minutes. It goes back to being a choice.
Now, I think one chapter that people will really enjoy in your book, Through the Tunnel, is the thunder of your thoughts. Now, your thoughts actually have an emotional component, which is energy. And it's through that energy that you actually experience your reality. Let's go ahead and talk about what you're saying there.
Well, you feel the way you think only 100% of the time, because every thought creates a chemistry in your brain, and you act upon that chemistry, whether you have anxiety, depression, whether you are excited, motivated. What we hold in our mind becomes our reality, because our unconscious mind doesn't know the difference between actual facts and a remembered, maybe a mismanaged memory. That's why we bring you into truth, into today, because most of all our memories are mismanaged. They're not totally accurate, and you saw them, you created that memory at a much younger age. You see what I mean? So you're remembering this trauma from a 3-year-old. Now, as a 33-year-old, that trauma is going to look a lot different, right? If you look back on it. Our thoughts and how we think dictates our health, our finances, our relationships, our potential, because you can't rise above your own thought life. The most important conversations any of us have each and every day is the conversation we have with ourselves. So we come around to it's about how you talk to yourself, the self-talk you have. If you bludgeon yourself with what you should have done, what you didn't do, if you live in guilt and allow that to go to shame, how powerful can you be in your own life? You can't even advocate for yourself. So you duplicate the patterns of the past, which are the pain, and you look at life through eyes to substantiate that, to prove to yourself you can never, accomplish, that you're stuck, that everybody else can, but you can't. So it just really polishes that chip that you might have on your shoulder. That answers the question. It all starts with a thought.
Yeah.
All change, Daniel, starts with a thought. And sometimes it's really hard because people hide behind their pain. People hide behind being a victim or a martyr, and poor me. Yes, it's terrible, awful that happened to you. I understand. I appreciate it. I don't have that experience, but I have compassion for you. Now, what are you going to do about it? Because there's always a positive option. You don't have to be a prisoner of your own thinking. But we get locked up in there. And then year after decade, we just grow old and we grow bitter and we grow angry. Instead of at any time you can get up and walk. At any time, Bonnie, you can have eyes to see. Because we walk in many ways, we see in many ways. We get so stuck and limited, you think you see with your eyes. This morning, my husband was looking for his vitamins, Daniel, and he looked and he was frustrated. He came around saying, I can't find my vitamins. And I just calmly said, I heard you put them in the drawer in the bathroom. And I was like 2 rooms away. And he goes, he went in there, and sure enough, they were there. He had 20/20 vision. He just forgot where he put them. Absent-minded. We see with our ears. We see with our hearts. We see with our gut. We see with our intuitiveness if we allow ourselves to be free and not be scared by being different or having an opinion and wanting other people to agree with us. Breaking that codependence. That I make you responsible for how I feel, or I make my life circumstances responsible for my well-being. Not true.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how people really, sometimes they really like to hold on to the idea that they are a victim, and they look for sympathy, and that's really a way that they have created relationships that they believe work for them, don't they?
Mhm. And it's their pseudo personality. It's not their real personality. It's them playing little. Remember Nelson Mandela's speech? I can't quote it all to you, but he said the problem isn't that we're too big. He said we play too little. All of us play too little based on our fears and our perceptions, and our anger keeps us so stuck, and our lack of self-esteem. So we all can be, but it takes courage to risk rejection. And you will not ever do that if you first reject yourself before you even open your mouth, apply for the job, apply for college. We reject ourselves before anybody else can when we have our identity into I'm less than, I'm not as good as other people. You understand what I'm saying?
And it's funny because here's a simple question, and I know that you talk about this in your book, Through the Tunnel. It's the way that we start questioning our thoughts, really paying attention to what we're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once people begin to get in the habit of that, that'll be liberating in and of itself. But
Oh, absolutely.
when you just posed that particular example of, well, I'm not as good as that other person, I'll never be able to do it as well as these people that I know who are doing that. A simple question I like, and it was one I got into a habit of, comes from the book Loving What Is by Byron Katie.
Oh, yeah.
And I love this question because this question really just hammers away, and it's funny if you stay quiet what your brain will say. And that is when you pose the question or make the statement, well, I'll never, let's say, be as good of a runner as my next door neighbor is. Okay. Then you just ask the question, what evidence do you have that that's completely true?
Very good.
And
Absolutely.
See what your brain actually says. You'll be amazed. It'll sit there and go, well, I really don't have any that I know of. And then start looking for, that who would I be if I could keep that thought, for instance. And I just love that inquiry she has because it's just 4 simple questions. But it gets you to start paying attention to why am I thinking this, and not necessarily asking why am I thinking that, but what evidence do I have behind that thought that it's true? Yes. And it's amazing how many times we actually lie to ourselves.
Oh, we do. That question brings you to reality, if you'll see it, because you don't have any evidence. The evidence that is it true? It's because you just sit in that chair and you can get up and move. You're right. Questions are doors, open doors of thought, opportunity, potential. But sometimes we don't slow down enough to sit still and listen, much less ask a question.
Now, one thing you talk about in your book, too, especially when it comes to our past, and talk about the power of this particular exercise, and that is reframing your past. What is that, and what do you do there?
Reframing your past is put a different frame around it. Like, have you ever had an old painting, old picture, and you want to clean it up? That's the example I give in the book, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful painting, and we just need to clean it up. And I'm going to take it to a framer and put a new frame around it. And when I did that, it gave the painting new life. What was trash, people were throwing away, giving away. Now it's gorgeous. It was a sight to behold. People wanted to spend time looking at it because it had so much detail. Reframing is take what you think is your pain, your past, your hurt, your sorrow, what's not there, and putting a new frame of reference around it that allows that to help you heal. All pain can help you grow deeper and heal yourself to grow up and not just old. Reframing is taking anything and putting, again, I see a gilded frame around it. Depends on what your motif is put different meaning around that event, that situation, that circumstances, so you're not a victim of it. That's how you won't be a victim of it, Daniel.
So would it be fair to say that a lot of times with, let's say, experiences that happen, that we tend to put meaning around it based on a past experience that triggers the memory? And so we're really kind of in a state of hypnosis, almost like a zombie, if you will.
Sure. It's called transference, and you're exactly right. Experience in and of itself is neutral. And the thoughts we put on that experience have been filtered through our life experiences, our belief system, our value system, who we think of ourselves, and then off of that thought is an emotion. To go, what emotion have I placed on this experience? That was neutral until I started thinking about it. So you can even think, what are your thoughts, Daniel? And your emotions, your feelings come from your thoughts. And at that point in time, you ask yourself, do I want to be a victim of my own thinking? Do I enjoy feeling this pain? Some people do. Some people are afraid to let it go because, again, it protects them. They know what to do with it. They know how to feel down. They know how to be depressed. They're too scared to say, I have to give up my label, my identity of always being sad and down and depressed or addicted, because then nobody would talk to me. Nobody would be around me, because when I need people, then they're here, So it's giving up your neediness, growing into a person who is capable of taking care of themselves emotionally, begins with emotionally, believing in themselves. So all experience is neutral. It's how we frame it, how we, put emotion, and emotion comes from our thoughts. And then you have a choice. Do I want to live in heaven or hell? Home sweet hell. That's where we live in our heads when we're addicts, when we keep in that loop you talked about. Quite frankly, I want to be free, and I'm willing to jump out of the, 30,000 feet in an airline. I'm willing to take that jump to freedom rather than be trapped in the pain of my past or trapped in my repetitive behaviors.
And especially when you think about, and I like how this really becomes very evident as you read your book, Through the Tunnel, is this. Let's say that you're going for a new experience that you've never had before. A good question to ask yourself is, rather than being afraid of doing it, let's just say that you said it sounded like skydiving, for instance.
Yes.
What would this experience bring or give me that I don't already have? It's pretty astounding when you ask real simple questions, how you can start untangling yourself from the fear. What evidence do I have that this is going to go the way that I think it will? And what will this bring me that I don't already have? And it's just amazing how empowering you find yourself. You'll start getting up out of bed realizing, 3 or 4 hours of sleep is just too much.
Yeah, that would be great, right? But you write history in advance, is what you're talking about. You want to see a successful outcome, but you have to allow yourself to embrace what you want, instead of just leaving it. If you aim at nothing, you'll get that, that. So when you've got the experience of skydiving and you ask the question, what do I want out of this experience? And you see yourself coming, successfully down to the ground. You've overcome your fear. You're elated. You want to take another trip, another jump. It's that you overcome your own self. That's what real growth and satisfaction in life is. It's overcoming yourself.
Amazing things for people to learn and to understand about themselves. Our guest joining us today, Dr. Bonnie Lyon. Her book is Through the Tunnel, Unlock the Pain of Your Past and Find the Courage to Grow Up and Not Just Old. We certainly want to be able to have that spark in our life no matter what age. Is there a website people can find out more about your work?
Sure. It's www.bonnielyon.com or www.throughthetunnel.org.
Very good. I want to thank you so much for taking the time and sharing this wonderful information here. And I know that if people read this, they'll begin to understand, maybe it's time that I put away this old tape and start a new one. Definitely. And I want to thank you so much for being on the program with us today.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it so much.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
We want to thank you, the listeners out there, for joining us. You can also discover more at Beyond50Radio.com. That is the number 50. We do encourage you to sign up for our weekly e-newsletter to keep up to date with what's going on in the world of Beyond 50, as well as our upcoming shows. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for joining us. This is the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.